Jennifer Aniston sat at the view table, legs crossed, posture calm. The same warm smile she'd worn for decades painted across her face. But under the studio lights, that smile looked thinner than usual, stretched just enough to crack if someone pressed too hard. Joy Behar sat across from her, flipping through her cards like she was sharpening knives. Sunny Hostin watched with that polite half-smile she wore when she smelled trouble. Sarah Haynes sat perched at the edge of her seat, her mug clutched in both hands like it was the only safe thing in reach. The audience hush felt soft at first, like they'd come for a sweet catch-up about old shows and new movies. But the edge was there, the hush that always comes when people want to see what happens if the world's favorite girl next door gets pushed. Whoopi kicked it off light, her tone warm, but her eyes already reading the room. Jennifer, you've been America's sweetheart for, what, 30 years now? How do you stay so calm? So nice. Jennifer gave the perfect laugh, the same one that made her a household name. I don't know, Whoopi. Maybe I'm just too tired to fight anymore. A soft laugh bubbled through the audience. Gentle, easy, exactly what they'd come for. But Joy didn't laugh. She tapped her pen against her notes, her smile thin as paper. Joy tilted her head. You're tired? Of what? The attention? The love? That must be exhausting. A ripple of uncomfortable chuckles ran through the crowd. The hush quivered around the edges. Jennifer's smile slipped just enough for the front row to see the crack. She leaned back, hands folded on her lap. It's not the love, Joy. It's the assumptions that come with it. People thinking they know who you are just because they've watched you on TV. Joy let out a dry chuckle, voice pitched sharp. Well, maybe they do know. Maybe they know you're good at pretending. That's your job, right? Pretend to be everyone's best friend. The hush broke. A gasp popped near the back, the tension snapping like a rubber band pulled too tight. Jennifer's laugh came out hollow, her eyes narrowing just a touch. Is that what you think? That it's all fake? Joy shrugged, her tone dripping sugar that didn't reach her eyes. I think people confuse likable with real. You're very likable, Jennifer. But real? I'm not so sure. The other hosts shifted in their seats. Sunny's eyes flicked from Joy to Jennifer, her mouth opening like she might jump in, but the words never made it out. Jennifer leaned forward, her voice quiet, but carrying like a knife slipping under skin. Be careful, Joy. You don't know me. Joy's laugh was sharp enough to draw blood. No, you're right. None of us do. That's the point. The hush held. Thicker now, sticky around every word that Jennifer's fingers tightened around her mug, knuckles whitening for just a moment before she forced her hand to relax. She took a slow breath that did nothing to soften the tension in her shoulders. So what is it, Joy? You brought me here to call me fake to my face. Joy didn't flinch. She crossed her arms, leaning back like she owned every inch of the table. I didn't bring you here for anything. You came because you're promoting a movie. So let's not pretend this is some deep confessional. The hush cracked. A nervous laugh scattered through the front row, but it died quick when Jennifer's eyes flicked that way, cold enough to stop it in its tracks. Sunny finally found her voice, words spilling out too quick. Maybe we can get back to the film. It's about second chances, right? Reinvention. Joy's smirk curled. Oh, Jennifer's the queen of reinvention. Divorce, tabloid rumors, new show, same sweet girl story every time. Jennifer let out a low, hollow laugh. And that bothers you, why? Because people still want to see me try? Or because you'd rather tear down someone who's never been anything but gracious to this industry? Sarah tried to jump in, her tone too perky for the moment. We all know how hard you've worked. Jennifer cut her off, voice sharp but measured. Sarah, don't. Let her talk. Let her say what she really thinks. Joy leaned in, her voice dropping into that acid-drip hush that always made the crowd lean forward. What I think, Jennifer, is you've been selling America the same story for 30 years. The relatable girl who just wants love. The best friend. The unlucky in love sweetheart. But the second someone scratches the surface, there's nothing real under there. The hush popped open, a small gasp near the middle row, a couple of audience members glancing at each other, unsure whether to clap or recoil. Jennifer's mouth pulled tight, her eyes locked on Joy. You think you know what's under my surface? I've lived half my life under a microscope you couldn't handle for 5 minutes. Joy's tone sharpened. Yeah, but you chose it. You can't play victim now. Jennifer's voice cracked just enough for everyone to hear it, raw but steady. I'm not your victim. I'm not your headline either. The hush shivered as Joy tilted her head, eyes glinting. Could have fooled me. The table fell dead quiet, Sarah and Sunny frozen in place, like they'd just realized they'd signed up to witness a car crash in slow motion. Jennifer shifted in her chair, her foot tapping the floor in a restless beat the mic barely caught. The smile was gone now, the mask cracked wide enough for everyone to see the anger brimming under the warmth. Jennifer's breath came shallow now, but her eyes didn't waver from Joy's. She leaned forward, her voice steady but raw at the edges. You want to sit there and poke holes in my life, Joy? Fine. But don't pretend you're doing it for some noble reason. Joy shrugged, lips curling in a smile that was more barbed wire than warmth. It's not about being noble. It's about being honest. These people, she said, sweeping her hand toward the audience, deserve honesty, don't they? A few people near the back row shifted uncomfortably, the hush bending with a small, guilty laugh that no one dared follow. Sunny's eyes darted from Joy to Jennifer, her hands clasped tight in her lap. We don't need to make this personal. But Jennifer didn't give her the chance. She cut in, eyes locked on Joy like she was daring her to keep going. Personal? It's always personal with you. You don't ask real questions. You poke wounds because it gets you a headline. Joy leaned back, unbothered, her tone syrupy. Better than selling a fairy tale that expired 20 years ago. The hush snapped, a low gasp, a stifled, "Oh" from someone who couldn't keep it in. Jennifer's jaw flexed, her hands curling into fists that rested on the table. You know what's funny, Joy? You think people want honesty from you? They just want the spectacle. You're not the truth teller. You're the clown that keeps the circus going. The audience let out a quiet, startled laugh, not sure if it was safe to cheer or cringe. Joy's eyes narrowed, her voice now cold enough to cut through the lights. Better to be a clown with nothing to hide than a sweetheart who can't stand a mirror. Sarah's voice broke through, too bright, too desperate. Let's just take a breath. Jennifer didn't even glance at her. No, let her finish. I want to hear all of it. What's your big truth, Joy? That I'm just a PR puppet? A woman who never deserved the love people gave me. Joy's tone dropped, words like vinegar. I think people gave you a crown for being pretty and nice. And you wore it like you earned it for bleeding. But we both know you never bled for it. The hush slammed down like a lid. Jennifer's breath hitched, her eyes glassy for half a second. Then the crack hardened into something sharper. She stood up halfway, her palms pressing the edge of the table so hard her knuckles whitened again. You think because you're mean, you're real? That's not how it works. That's just mean. A few claps sputtered in the audience. Not loud, not brave, but enough to make Joy roll her eyes and lean back in her chair like a cat stretching its claws. Sunny's voice wobbled. Jen, you don't have to. Jennifer cut her a look, and Sunny fell silent, words dying on her lips. The hush hung in the air like a storm that hadn't cracked open yet, but everyone knew it would. Jennifer's eyes glistened, but no tears fell. She straightened, pushing her chair back just an inch like she wasn't sure if she'd bolt or stand her ground. Her voice trembled, not from weakness, but from the strain of keeping it steady. You know what hurts, Joy? Not the gossip, not the tabloids. This. Sitting across from another woman who should know better, and hearing her spit in your face because the world gave you something she thinks you didn't deserve. The hush cracked, a soft rolled from the middle rows, a tiny ripple of claps that fizzled before they could build. Joy arched her brow, her laugh dry as desert wind. Spare me the sisterhood speech, Jennifer. You made millions off the good girl act, and now you're mad that someone calls it out. Jennifer's head snapped back like she'd been slapped, but the mask didn't slip this time. It shattered. You think you know my life? You think you know what it cost to be the good girl? The nights I sat alone while the world ripped my marriage apart? The way people cheered when I fell, just so they could say, see? She's not perfect after all. The hush turned heavy, the audience frozen, caught between pity and awe at the heat in her words. Sunny tried to break it, her voice soft, cracking around the edges. Jen, you don't have to explain. But Jennifer didn't stop. She pushed on, every word hitting the table like a fist. You want real? Here it is. I worked my ass off for every single moment. I kept smiling while people picked me apart. I showed up when I wanted to disappear. You don't get to call that fake just because you never had to do it. Joy smirked, but her eyes flickered, a tiny glint of something that looked like second thoughts. Still, her voice stayed acid sharp. Cry me a river. You're still rich. You're still loved. Poor Jennifer Aniston. The hush split. Half the audience gasped, the other half too stunned to breathe. Jennifer's laugh came out raw, like it hurt to force it. You know what? Maybe I am lucky. Lucky enough to stand here and see people like you for what they really are. Joy rolled her eyes, flipping through her cards like she was looking for a line sharp enough to cut deeper. Jennifer leaned forward, voice low, trembling but steady. You think being cruel makes you strong. It doesn't. It makes you lonely. And I'd rather be fake and loved than real and empty like you. The hush burst into a scatter of claps. Not everyone, but enough to drown out the scrape of Joy's pen snapping in her hand. Sarah shifted her chair like she wanted to crawl under the table. Sunny stared at the floor, her lips pressed so tight they'd turned white. Jennifer's shoulders heaved once, the quiet between them thick enough to choke on. Joy twirled her broken pen between her fingers, that smirk still frozen on her face, but her eyes blinking fast, like she couldn't decide if she'd won or pushed too far. She leaned back, crossing her arms, voice pitched just high enough to cut. Well, maybe next time don't come here if you can't handle a real question. Jennifer scoffed, a raw sound that caught in her throat. A real question? That wasn't a question, Joy. That was you swinging at me for sport. Joy didn't back down. She tilted her head, letting out a slow laugh that sounded like nails scraping glass. Oh, poor you. One tough morning with real talk, and suddenly you're the victim again. The hush snapped, a low wow from the back row, a ripple of claps that stuttered then fell away when they realized nobody was brave enough to carry it. Sunny shifted in her seat, voice so soft the mic barely caught it. Joy, this is going too far. Joy snapped back, her tone sharp as broken glass. Stay out of it, Sunny. You're not the one selling fake fairy tales for 30 years. Jennifer's hands trembled against the table, but she didn't flinch. She breathed once, slow and deep, like she was pinning the last pieces of herself together before they scattered for good. You know, I always knew what people whispered about me. The sweetheart who can't hold on to a man. The girl who'll never have a family. The actress who's only as good as the brand she plays. Her voice cracked, just once, but she didn't stop. I swallowed it for years. Let you laugh about my life because it made people feel better about theirs. But you're not better. You're just meaner. Joy's mouth twitched, but her words stuck in her throat for half a heartbeat. She forced a snort. Yeah? And you're just fragile. Jennifer's eyes glowed with that wounded steel that made half the audience lean forward without realizing they were doing it. I'd rather be fragile than bitter. The hush cracked wide. A smattering of claps, braver this time, rolling through the side rows like an aftershock. Sarah's eyes were glassy, but she didn't say a word. Sunny looked away, like she was ashamed to be sitting at the same table. Joy opened her mouth, ready to spit out one more line. But the audience was shifting now, the hush turning on her, the claps warming around Jennifer's raw honesty. Jennifer stood slowly, her chair scraping back just enough to send a jolt down the mic line. She looked down at Joy, not with hate, but with a sadness that cut deeper than any insult. You don't get to call me fake, Joy. Not when you've made a living off tearing people apart. You'll never have the courage to be. The hush held, one heartbeat too long. Waiting for someone to break it, Jennifer's hands dropped to her sides, palms open like she was done carrying the weight of it. She looked out past the cameras, eyes sweeping over the audience that had once felt like family. The people who bought the magazines, who gasped at every headline, who laughed and whispered and guessed what she must be like when the lights went off. She breathed once, chest trembling, but her voice never cracked again. For every woman who's ever been called fake for surviving, I see you. For every woman who's ever smiled when it hurt because that's what the world asked of her, I see you too. The hush trembled, bending into a ripple of claps, small at first, then swelling as more hands joined in. It wasn't loud, not wild or rowdy, just raw, the kind that stuck to the back of the throat. Joy's arms stayed crossed, but her eyes flicked away, blinking too fast. For the first time, she didn't have a comeback. Jennifer turned to Sarah and Sunny, her tone softer now, not an apology, but a reminder that they'd all have to keep sitting here when she was gone. Be careful with the truth, ladies. It can build you up, or it can cut you to pieces if you twist it to fit your bitterness. Sarah nodded, small and shaky. Sunny reached out, but Jennifer didn't take her hand. She just smiled, something sad and tired around the edges. She looked back at Joy one last time, voice like a closing door. You can have the last word, Joy. You always do. But today, you're not going to have mine. She stepped back from the table, her heels clicking sharp across the studio floor. The hush broke into applause. Not roaring, not a standing ovation, but enough to drown out the empty scrape of Joy's pen across her note cards. Jennifer didn't turn around. She didn't wave. She just walked straight past the lights, the cameras, the forced smiles, out into a quiet that belonged only to her. And for the first time in a long time, the girl everyone called America's sweetheart didn't have to smile if she didn't want to. The hush hung in the empty space she left behind, sharp, bruised, and real.